Okay, I think we are live. I just need to double check each time just to make sure that we are actually live. So give me a second if I am actually already live. It's here. I'm getting on the video so I can see your questions if you have any. So hello again, everyone. So this is Yoshito Darmon-Shimamori. And during this event, so I'm going to be conducting three sessions. And this one is the first one that I'm going to do on mindset and how it can help us design an enjoyable multiliteracy journey. After this one, I'm going to do another session where I'm going to be talking about teaching our children when we're lacking time. It's something that we probably all feel like we don't have enough time in the day to do everything. Yeah, so how can we, on top of all the things we have to do, how can we still teach our children to read and write in our home languages? And tomorrow, I do another session on how to make reading and writing relevant and purposeful to our children so that they want to do it and they see the point of doing it, which is something I didn't always feel when I was a child. So I'm trying to change that for my own children and for other children, multilingual children around the world. And so as you can see, for each of these sessions, I will be on my own. So if you have any questions, any comments you want to make, feel free to do so. I have a few points that are ready to talk about, but just feel free to come and interact. Yeah, it will make me feel less lonely. So I'm taking this opportunity as well to remind everyone about the numerous giveaways that are organized by myself and the other speakers. You can find them all in the program of the event. So you can, if you don't have it, you can get it at bit.ly/multiliteracy event, all in one word, no capital letters. So bit.ly/multiliteracy event. You can get the program, and inside you're going to see loads of little red gift icons. If you click on them, it's going to bring you to a Google form where you can click on all the giveaways you want to enter. And after, just to be able to be selected or to qualify for entering the giveaway, you just need to go and watch the videos of the people who made these, who are giving away these gifts. There are books, games, and I'm also giving away an author visit with loads of resources inside. So I'll let you check that. And we're going to start with our session. So before we start, for those of you who don't know me, I'm going to explain a bit who I am, what brought me to do all of this, especially specializing in multilingual literacy. And because this is something that's, I guess, close to my heart, it's through my experience that it became really important. So I grew up French, Japanese in France, and I lived in France for up to I was 23 years old. So I really learned to speak, read, and write in Japanese while living in France. So why it was a minoritized language. And for me, speaking was great because it gave me, it helped me connect with my family and friends, appreciate some cartoons, etc. But reading and writing have not been as easy. So yeah, quite challenging, trying to learn Chinese characters, so the kanji in Japanese, because I didn't really see the point, thinking that I had to put a lot of effort, but I was surely not going to be living in Japan. So why did I have to put so much effort? So I talk about this aspect a bit more tomorrow, about how to make our languages more relevant, especially the reading and writing. So I grew up bilingual, and now, so with my wife, who is Korean, we're raising trilingual children. So we have 2 sons who are 8 and 10, and they speak 3 languages. So French, Korean, so French for me, Korean from my wife, and English from school. And we raise them with 4 cultures, the 4th one being the Japanese culture. So I'm passing on the culture, not really the language. If you have questions about that, I'm happy to elaborate on it. And so by extension, so due to all of this, I founded the Library for Multilinguals, which is a company through which I try to give information about multilingual literacy, but also I create resources. So I have published already a book about 2 years ago, which is a guide for parents to teach their children to read and write in their home languages in a fun way. And I'm in the process of publishing 3 other books. So this one is the first one, it's a proof copy. So not, I just went through it and it looks all fine. So that's great. And this one is a bilingual graphic novel that's designed for children to think about their own multilingual journey, but also to motivate them to write in their home languages. So that's my passion. That's what I do. It's really to try to motivate children to read and write in their home languages. And yeah, and also what's helping me to do all of that is my background in teaching. So I'm a teacher of French and Spanish, so foreign languages, in a secondary school in London. And the way I do it is by trying to make the languages relevant within the classroom, not just talking about exams and you have to learn French or Spanish because you have to, but trying to give them a reason to speak, read, write in their foreign languages. And so, but I'm going to talk about more of that tomorrow in the session. So it's titled How to Make Reading and Writing Relevant and Purposeful, which are 2 things I think are very important, whether we teach it in the classroom or we teach it at home. And the reason I wanted to start with a session on mindset is from my own experience and the experience of people I know, where I could see that the way they see a situation can really block them or put extra challenges on the way. So I think it might seem like a small thing, but it's actually a big thing to get right. So we're going to start by talking about the pressure, which is something we probably all have just as parents in general, but also as parents raising multilingual children. Sorry. So the pressure, it can be 2 kinds of pressures, the one we put on ourselves and the one we might end up putting on our children. So for the one we put on ourselves, there are loads of reasons we put pressure on ourselves, but I guess one of them is due to what people tell us. It could be family members, friends, or sometimes complete strangers, who tell us that we are jeopardizing our children's future, academic future, by speaking to them in our home languages because it can confuse them, etc. Regarding this, we had an interview with Dr. Bialystok yesterday, who's going to give you some really nice answers if someone tells you that. So I invite you to watch this interview. And yeah, so it can be pressure that people put on us because they make us think that it could put our children in some sort of disadvantage. And I guess the stress comes from the fact that we sort of believe in that. We might know that it's not true, but we might have some doubts, and that's going to start putting pressure on us. And I certainly have had that kind of pressure in the past. I probably have other sort of pressure regarding the way I raise my children with multiple languages and try to raise them multi-literate in the future as well. So it's not all resolved. But I guess one thing we can do is first to try to speak the least amount possible to the kind of people who are trying to, not necessarily in a bad way, but who are putting pressure on us by make us feel like we're not doing the right thing. And the other very important thing is to to get informed, to get information about what the research says, and that's why I invited researchers into this event, so we can have the facts and the latest facts, research and conclusions, that results that we have at the moment. And another really useful thing is to connect with other families on the same journey. So raising multilingual children can be multilingual, multi-literate, multicultural, but with other parents who are doing the same thing, because we're going to see that they have challenges as well. But also we can get some solutions, and that's what I'm trying to do here in these sessions by sharing my own experience. So own personal experience, professional experience, to help you maybe see things in a different way, or give you tips that can help you. The other reason we might be stressed or have pressure is because we compare with other children. Maybe can be other multilingual children who speak the same language as our children, but maybe are speaking a lot better, who can read and write a lot better, or with monolingual children thinking, oh wow, in the school language, maybe my child is a bit behind. So should I spend more time on the school language, etc. So it can be different things, but it's mainly to do with comparing. So one thing I would say is to try to focus on what our children do well, what are their strengths, and also keeping in mind that every child's journey is going to be different. We are all different as parents, our children are all different, even between siblings they're different. So we can't even do the same thing with all our children. But to keep that in mind, yeah, and there is one thing that I heard from Simon Sinek, who is a famous public speaker, who talked about when those skiers who go really quickly between the trees in the forest, or bikers who go in the forest really quickly. There are loads of trees, and when we see the videos, like it looks like we're going to bump into a tree at any moment, but they manage not to. And he said that they don't often they don't bump into a tree because they don't focus on the tree. They don't focus on the on the negative, which can be like all the comparisons we're making, but they focus on their goal, on the track they're on. So they focus on the path, and they think, I must follow the path, must follow the path, must follow the path. And if you focus on the path, you're going to follow the path. If you think, I must avoid that tree, I must avoid that tree, at some point, because you're putting so much focus on the trees, you're going to bump into one of them. So I guess the message is to see the cup the glass half full rather than half empty. So to focus on what our children can do, and try to get them to see that what's good about that as well, if they start comparing themselves as well. Okay, and another type of pressure could be if we see that things don't go well. So it could be, for example, we thought that our children would be able to do this and that at that stage, but they're far from it, or that we have spent a lot of time researching books that we think they're going to love and actually don't love them at all, or preparing an activity that they don't want to do. And I think it's part of the journey, but we need to just see the bigger picture. It will happen. It happens to everyone. It happens to me often. And I guess it's like yeah, I think it's a famous basketball player. I can't remember if it was Michael Jordan or someone else, but who said that so that he made the most winning shoots because he's also the one who missed the most out of them. So we're going to miss a lot, make a lot of mistakes, but if we keep going, there are going to be things that are going to go well, and this is going to add up. So these are a few things to release some pressure from ourselves. And another problem is that when we are stressed, we might end up putting pressure on our children. And so that's two things we need to keep in mind is that the best way for a child not to do something, so for example, not speaking our language, not reading and writing our language, is to force them to do that. So, and honestly, we're the same. So I guess, yeah, so not forcing them. I know sometimes it's difficult, and I speak from experience because I sometimes try to have to refrain myself from trying to push my sons to do this or that, whether it's language related or not. But yeah. And it's also really important to try to understand our children from their point of view. So for example, one worry I had was I was asking myself, why do my sons speak so much in English to us? When I grew up with my brother, for us, it was very natural to speak in Japanese to our mom and French to our dad. So, and it was even feeling weird to speak in French to our mom up to a certain level. I know that when I was in secondary school and trying to speak about other more complex things when I didn't know the vocabulary, I had to switch to French, but it was mainly in Japanese with some words in the middle in French or some expressions. Yeah, but my sons have started to speak back to us in English very early. So I think when they were, like my eldest was 6 or 7, he was speaking quite naturally back to me in English. So I was speaking in French, but he was speaking back to me in English, and back to his mom in Korean. So I was wondering what we did differently that made that change between the way I was when I was a child and my brother and the way my own sons are at the moment. And by stepping back, I realized that I created a model where for them it was natural to speak in English. When I say I created this model, so when I grew up, it was very clear, Japanese with my mom, French with my dad. And when we had a whole family conversation was in French. Where with our family, I always stay in French when I speak to my wife or children, because my wife speaks fluent French. And my wife speaks Korean to them. But I don't speak Korean well enough to converse. I can understand bits here and there, so I can follow a conversation. But I need to, when I take part in the conversation, it's in French. So I stay in my language. She stays in her language. Why would my sons switch between the languages? It's easier for them to just speak in English because that's their strongest language. They speak a lot, they spend a lot more time in school. So for them, it's a lot easier. So I created this model. But if I had just looked at the facts, they speak in English when I speak in French, I didn't used to do that. And I would think there is a problem here, but it's by stepping back and analyzing from their point of view why they would do that, that I started understanding their point of view. And so then my goal is, and I'm going to talk about it tomorrow, I promise, there is a session on this, it's how can I make them want to speak, but also read and write in our home languages. And so talking about reading and writing, sorry, we need to keep in mind that the school language or community language is different from the home language in terms of status they have for our children. So the school language is functional. It's something we need in society to function in society. And reading and writing, they read and write in school as well because they have to, because that's the language of education. And everybody does that. And yeah, our whole environment is in that language. Now, the home language is more like an optional thing. Okay, speaking with us, they connect with us. It's more than enough. Reading and writing, it's okay, they could read more books, but technically speaking, if they only spoke or could read in the school language or community language, they have access much more easily and with to many more books than in the home language. So technically, they don't have to be able to read in our home languages. And also, especially when it comes to writing, because writing is a lot more effort than reading, it can feel like extra work. And if we do it in academic way, it will feel like extra work, and there will be some pushbacks. Then I guess it depends how we do it, our children's personalities. I know it works for some families. With my eldest, it doesn't work at all. With my youngest, it works a lot better. I mean, to do things that look quite academic. So sitting at the desk and doing some writing like dictations. I've done with dictations much more easily with my youngest, like traditional. Well, I did a few things, but let's say overly traditional. Than with my eldest. With my eldest, it really had to look like a game. Yeah, so learning to read and write in our home languages is another thing to remember. It's our goal. It's not our children's goal. They don't know. We know what it can bring them. We know like at a professional level, academic level, we can bring them. We know as well the pleasure it can be to be able to read books in all the languages. But when they start on the multi-literacy journey, they don't know all that. So we need to make sure they can feel this pleasure as well, the rewards right now, so that we want to read and write in our languages. And so once we have that in mind, we need to see why they would want to read in our home languages. So and why would they want to write? So the point I'm trying to make is that we need to try to see things from their point of view. Once we look at the situation from their point of view, things will look more logical for us, and we'll be able to act more appropriately. And it will avoid some frustration as well for us. Another important point I would like to make is that we must not believe that the current state is forever. So when I say that is, for example, when there's some pushback, or at some point my eldest wanted to stop any work, games, anything we're doing in French. Yeah, so, and at the time I worried like, oh, am I creating a bad experience? What can I do to change? But I just left some time and we came back to it later. I made a video on this on my YouTube channel where I talk about my son's multi-literacy journey from going to be a reluctant reader in English, so the school language, to being enthusiastic reader in all his languages. So you can check that as well. I can put the links in the description. And yeah, and also we need to be patient. So like I said, now he loves to read in all his languages, and it doesn't matter in which language it is, he just loves to read. And I think if thinking back, like if it was when he was 6 years old, I wouldn't have thought it would go that far. So for my second child, he's not as passionate about reading, but he enjoys reading as well. So I guess there are different degrees, but yeah, we need to be patient and just see things long term. And now I want to come to what we did for our sons to be able to read in all their languages. And I know I'm talking about mindset in general, but here it's a bit more practical things we've done to, I guess, but change the environment to go about what we talked about in the previous session with Anna and Vivian from Lucas Library. So our goal shouldn't be that we want our children to read in our home language. It should be that we want our children to read in our home language or languages too. So it's in addition to bring more to the experience and not just keeping to by focusing just on our home language. So when I say this, I mean that, for example, okay, I would never say so that to my son, okay, let's read a book in French, because that focuses on the language. Or when we were okay, when we're choosing books to read for story time, bedtime stories, I don't say, okay, which French book are we going to read, or I don't say we're going to read this because it's in French, but I go more about would they want to read a story that's more about an adventure, or it could be about knights or dinosaurs, or what they want to read, more than focus on the language. So I don't limit by the language, I limit by the genre of, or the type of stories they want to read, because that's going to give them a much, first, it doesn't limit to the language, it gives them a much wider choice of books. And that's one thing we did, to not focus on the language, but focus on reading and the love of reading. So also you might think, but what if they only ask for books that happen to be in English? So that might happen. There've been times where we kept reading books after books in English, and that's fine. But I was also thinking, stressing myself, thinking, we need to read in French. So I was sometimes saying, oh, why don't we read this book? It's been a long time we haven't read it. And by chance, it happens to be a French book. But yeah, so, or so they want to read a book about knights. And I happen to take one and say, oh yeah, can I read this book? Because I'd like to read it. And like, bedtime story is like a time we spend together. So it's not necessarily that we read the books they want. Sometimes I can say, I'd like to read this book. And if they don't have a book they want to read, generally they go with it, because for them, it's, I think, more about spending time together than reading a certain story. I guess it can depend from child to child, but at least for my son, it's like that. And also, so one other thing is, because we made the experience of reading, learning to read fun, they learned to read as a consequence. So it wasn't like, okay, obviously it was activities that they knew I was doing with them because I wanted them to learn to read. And they were doing that, but the main thing that they could see in front of their eyes was a game. It could be like a memory game, etc. But the end result was that they were practicing, and as a consequence, they were learning. So I think that's a thing to keep in mind, is not to make reading and writing the first thing they can see in front of their face, but they can see something fun. And although they know that, okay, it's to practice reading and writing, but they see the fun thing. And as a consequence, because they enjoy themselves so much, they practice more, they want to practice more, and then they end up being able to read and write better. Another thing we've done is that we read a lot with them, often going to the library, so which means that we get books in English as well, and also we write and read a lot with them. So a lot more when they were children, we would do that together. Now they can read on their own. They read a lot on their own as well. But I remember, for example, when my sons couldn't read yet, I remember once I came back from school, and we just got big boxes of Korean books, because we bought them off from someone else, and we had loads. And both our sons were sitting on the bed with my wife, and they were reading books after books after books. And apparently they had spent several hours like that. And but it wasn't a one-off, it was quite often. And we tried to spend time reading with them. And I think that's an important thing to do. And lots of speakers have said that already, that reading with our children is really, really key. And I would add that it doesn't need to be just, a home language, but just reading, and develop this curiosity and love for reading, what books can bring us. And another thing is, so something I a mistake I did, well, a mistake is not a big mistake, but something I've learned from experience as well is to not push our children to read. So let's say we're reading. So for example, when we were reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid, if you know it, you know there are loads of little paragraphs. Some are like 1, 2 lines long, 1, 2, 3, can be 4, 5, 6 lines long, but they're all generally very short. And because I wanted my son to read and to practice reading, I said, okay, I read any paragraph that's longer than 3 lines. You read all those that are 3 lines or shorter. But it was a lot of effort, and because at the time he was starting to be able to read, he liked the story, but it was a bit of pressure, effort at a moment when he didn't want that. At the end of the day, when we were going to sleep, he didn't want that. So at some point, because I could see it wasn't really a positive experience for him, I just stopped and I just read myself. And little by little, so he's enjoying the story and he was feeling more confident. And I wasn't asking him to read. He was sometimes starting to read. One thing you need to know is that I often fall asleep at night if I start reading to my son, mainly because I lie down on my back and I have the book like this. So I'm in a position where I can fall asleep easily. So it's my fault as well. But when my eldest started to be able to read fluently, he would just take the book and carry on reading out loud so he could read for himself, but also his brother. Before that, he would push me to wake me up to carry on reading. But yeah, and then that's when I started to see, okay, he knows how to read. Now he's feeling more confident, so I don't always need to read to him, but he can do it on his own as well. Yeah, so we don't need to push our children. We need to keep this a nice positive experience. And there are going to be moments where we can make it a bit more work, but if we decide, okay, bedtime story is a moment we spend with our children, we shouldn't mix it with something that looks like too much effort. So we need to, as I said before, see things from our children's point of view and see if it's something, a moment that's appropriate for them to read and write, or to put the effort to read and write. Okay, one more thing I would like to touch upon. So I said before, did I mention it? Can't remember. But I think that one of our goals is to find books that our children are going to love. Yeah, because that's something we can leverage a lot. So I'm going to take the example of French and Korean. So when my son was about 7, he discovered Dogman, which is oh, my son took it. Oh no, it's here. Okay, it's the Dogman. So I have the French version here, based on Dogman by Dave Pirkey. And it's really funny, silly. I thought it was stupid. And I didn't really like it. But my son, when he read it, he loved it so much. The day he got the first book in French, he spent several hours reading, and he was just at a stage where he could barely decipher the French, or not, maybe a bit more. He could read, but it was tedious. But so with comic books and picture books, I would say one thing that's really powerful is that you get most of the fun by looking at the images. And if you don't understand all of the text, but you can see these expressions, you want to know what are they saying. And the first thing I remember he was reading out loud were the onomatopoeias, because it's easy to read and it's a lot of emotion. It makes the story come alive. So all these onomatopoeias were very, very powerful. And so we can leverage that. But So at the time, little bit he improved on his French. He improved really quickly thanks to these books that he loved, and he could read in French a lot more easily. And I remember once my wife told me that so in Korean he couldn't read that fast, and she said it's probably because the script is different, so it's more difficult. And I said no, it's not that. It's just because he loves it so much that he wants to read them, and he's putting the time. He's practicing all that time to read in French. And this, she understood, it became true when never mind. I wanted to show you a series in Korean that we discovered. I think he was 8 or 9, yeah, probably 9 years old when we went to Korea, and we discovered it through the son of a friend who was a bit older than my son, my eldest. And he said this book is great, and he showed it to him. And again, it was a silly book. It's called Hunhan Namme. And so if you have Korean as one of your languages and you don't know it, check it out. Hunhan Namme. You can find it on YouTube as well. It's two comedians who are making silly sketches, etc. It's all their adventures. So there is an like I say film version where we can see them. There is a cartoon version, and there is the comic book version. So with these comic books, he loved it so much that he started being able to read a lot more fluently. And my youngest started to read these books first. So it's when he was at a stage where he could start reading quite well, he started reading these Korean books. So I remember once I asked him, we were talking about which languages he found easier to read in, and he said, Korean is a lot easier to read. French is easier to speak, but Korean is easier to read. And that's because, okay, it is in a different script. So the language he reads in most easily, yeah, is English. So it's a different script, but he said Korean is easier to read than French, which has the same script as English. And that's because he practiced a lot more reading Korean with these comic books. So finding the right book is really important because we can leverage that a lot. I think actually that's something I wanted to talk about later on. Never mind, in another session. But okay, one thing I want to talk about, which is regarding mindset, is the setbacks. So there are going to be setbacks. It's not about how can we avoid the setbacks, because there will be setbacks that everybody faces, or just we face because of our particular situation, but we're going to face setbacks. How we need to see the situation is more about we're going to have setbacks. We just need to be prepared to look at how we can go around them. So not be defeated if there are setbacks. It's like I spoke before about Michael Jordan, like missing many winning shoots. I don't know the basketball vocabulary, but he also scored the most of them because he missed a lot of them as well. So we're going to make lots of mistakes. There's going to be a lot of setback, but all the little wins are going to add up at some point. Yeah, and so I guess what I would like to, did I have anything else? Let me check. Let me just double check. Yeah. Okay, so a few more things. So one is not to put any hierarchy or categorize our books or our languages by language. So I mentioned it a bit earlier in terms of choice of book, but also not put any hierarchies, like for example, saying that we have to read books in that language at that time, or like, especially when it's for fun. If you want to work on it to practice reading, that's fine. But I guess it needs to be a bit obvious, not obvious, clear. that you're doing this to practice a bit. So for example, you can say, okay, we're going to read 5 minutes together every day, a book in Korean, in French, in whatever your home language is. And I guess that's fine because they know it's the time to do this. But otherwise, if it's for pleasure, we shouldn't ask our children, we shouldn't tell our children to choose. No, we shouldn't focus on one particular language and say it's just this one. That's one point I wanted to make. Another one, and that's really important, that can help us a lot in terms of mindset, is to remember that unless we need to go back to our home country and our children are going to be schooled there in our home language, which is going to become the community language, or that we're preparing them for some sort of exam or whatever. Except in these circumstances, we have all the time we need, and we can just go at our children's pace. And that can be really, really powerful. It's not like we need to go at a certain pace, like when we're in school, like there are certain students who are going to learn a bit slower than others more faster, others faster. And that can put pressure on the students. But when it's the home language, you can really go at their own pace. So we should just be ready to wait, be ready to pause as well. Like I said, for my son, the beginning of the multi-literacy journey was really good in French, but then I was so enthusiastic and he could see I was happy to see him do well, and he put pressure on himself, saying that he had to perform well. That's another thing. If you want to learn more about this thing about not putting too much pressure, I talked about it in my book, The Parent's Guide to Raising Multi-literate Children. But so being too enthusiastic could put a pressure as well, and we need to know what to reward. So talk more about the effort they're making rather than the result. And what was I saying? Yeah, so we can go at our children's pace. Yeah. And so at first I was enthusiastic. I was putting pressure on my son unknowingly. And so at some point he didn't want to carry on anymore. So I thought, okay, rather than giving him like too much pressure, so negative experience, I'm going to just pause. So the time we would spend generally working on literacy or playing with literacy, we would just do it playing different things. So we still had that moment, but it wasn't just focused on literacy. And at some point, he wanted to start learning Korean. So I said, do you want me to teach you Korean? And he said, yes, but not like in French. So I made it a lot more fun, like 100% fun games. He loved it. And then after he said he wanted to learn to read in French, but he wanted to do it the Korean way, so with games. Yeah, so we shouldn't be afraid to wait, to pause, and to go to our children's pace, and also go with what enthused them. So I talked about Dogman for French that we used, Kunhan Name for Korean. Yeah. Okay. And so I guess out of all of this, what I want to say is that we need to focus on creating an enjoyable experience. And that way, there are more chances that they're going to get back to it, even if they stop. So focus on the experience, creating a positive experience, so that later on they can, even if they stop, they want to do it again because they see it's fun, and they're not going to be ready for all the steps when we want to. They're going to be ready when they're ready. We can only prepare them or try to give help, support them on that journey. Okay, so I'm going to finish on this note. I think my next session is in half an hour. I don't have the program with me. I should have had it. Let me check. When do I start the next one? No, I didn't take the program. I think it's in half an hour. So I'll meet you again then to talk about what we can do, how to teach our children to read and write in our home languages when we're lacking time. So I see you a bit later, and so enjoy your weekend until then. I hope you enjoy all the sessions we're putting together. Bye, everyone.